Good morning, everyone. Still morning, right? Couple of minutes. Perfect. Okay. Thanks for coming, guys. I'll just really quickly start off by introducing myself. In case you don't know who I am, my name is Nick. I'm a narrative designer. I've worked as a narrative designer for, coming up on, I think, 9 years now. So starting to become quite a thing in my life. I have worked in the indie sector, and most recently I worked as the senior narrative designer for a AAA studio called Shark Mob in London, which I believe unfortunately is not around anymore, as is often the case with studios at the moment. I wanted to talk to you guys today about this concept here, the idea of using anthropology to build believable, realistic cultures in your games. So if we just get started. Oh gosh, that's really high up for me. Okay, I'm going to look over here. Right, so when I was working at Shark Mob, we were working on a large sort of open world fantasy sort of RPG game that was inspired by real world history, real world cultures. And the sort of prerequisites that we had was that these cultures had all left their points of origin and come and moved over to this sort of fantastical setting. And so we were trying to figure out how do you bring all these different groups together and create a fictional culture when they have had no interaction with each other. They only know about their own cultural past, but they have no concept of like what was going to happen in the future with their societies. And so the big question really was how do you design a fictional civilization, one that feels grounded, one that feels believable, and is also able to adapt over time and become become a new thing. So that was the problem that we had, and it was quite a problem. We worked on this for a good probably 3.5 months trying to figure it out. And in the end, this is what I came up with. So this is the Living World Pipeline. So the Living World Pipeline is based off a set of different anthropological principles about how cultures develop in real world. So we begin with this concept of the cultural core. Now this comes from the anthropologist Julian Stewart, who wrote about this in Theory of Culture Change. And then we move to symbolic systems from Clifford Geertz, another anthropologist, before heading to sacred landscapes with Mircea Eliade. And then lastly, as an optional step, if you are wanting to progress your culture into the future, then we've got projected futures, which I've drawn from Arjun Appadurai. I think I got that name right. So I'm going to take us through each one step by step so you can kind of see how these all work. And then we're going to look at an example as well. So the cultural core, right, is all about this idea that the environment itself shapes how people develop into societies and then later into civilizations, essentially how they organize themselves together. You can break this down into these 4 separate steps. So subsistence technology, so this is how does the environment direct the tools, techniques and methods that a society uses to gather food and resources. Labor organization, how does the environment direct the ways in which a society divides up and coordinates work to make subsistence possible. Settlement patterns, how does the environment direct the physical arrangement of where and how people live? And religious or political patterns as well. So how does subsistence and resource use, which, as I said before, is defined by environmental factors, connect to the social or ritual structures of a society? Moving to the next one, so we have symbolic systems. So this is how people make meaning out of surviving within their environment, and they do that through typically myths, rituals, folk stories, all that fun lore stuff, right? So this one we can break down into symbols. So what are the objects, actions, or words that stand for deeper ideas in a society? Rituals, what are the repeated symbolic acts that a society uses to dramatize and reinforce their cultural values? Meaning making, what are the interpretations that people in a society attach to their practices? What are the stories they tell themselves about themselves? And then lastly, worldview. So this is about the broader sense of order for the society. What is their idea around morality? What is the identity that they are constructing for themselves through symbols and rituals? Then we move into sacred landscapes. So this is where the land itself starts to become infused with these sort of spiritual, religious, folk ideas, right? And this one we can break down into Axis Mundi. So this is like the central site of religious belief usually. It might be a mountain or a tree or a river, or it could be something man-made as well, so like a temple or a church. And these, the Axis Mundi links the human world to the world of the divine, right? So a great example, Mount Olympus in Greek mythology, right? It's a physical location, but it's the sort of bridge between Greek culture and their gods. Then we move into sacred versus profane. So there are always sacred spaces in a culture. These are spaces that impose order and meaning for the culture. And then on the flip side, we have profane spaces as well. So these are not necessarily bad or evil spaces, as the word profane might suggest. They could also just be ordinary spaces, right? Like out on the street, for example. But they can also be, hostile to the sacred as well. Then we have mythic reenactment, so what rituals are conducted at these sacred sites to renew contact for a society with their perceived cosmic or ancestral origins, right? So so some cultures might see themselves as being descendant from a mythical first people, for example, and so the mythic reenactment is about reconnecting with that idea and reinforcing that idea for the community as it grows and develops. And then lastly, how am I going to say this word? Hierophany. And so this is the natural features in the environment. So your rivers, caves, stones that are believed by a society to reveal the presence of the sacred. So that hopefully everyone followed that. I know that was a lot to sort of take in very quickly, but hopefully it'll become more clear as we get into the example. But before we do that, I will just jump on to speculative futures as well. This one is a little bit harder to sort of pin down, as there's not really too much anthropological research about the future, obviously. But we can sort of look at the way societies develop over time and sort of almost predict how they might develop in the future. And this was incredibly important for us when we were working at Shark Mob, because we had, like I said, all these different cultures converging in one place, and they converged, I believe, about 500 or so years before the present day of the game itself. And so we needed to understand, well, how did these cultures then sort of muddle together and create something new? And so what we can look at here is the technological shifts. So how does a society's subsistence base evolve into new technologies and forms of energy use over time? Political complexity, obviously. We probably all know a lot about that at this point in time. So this is how the social systems change as a society grows. Do they remain egalitarian? Do they develop ranked hierarchies, chiefdoms, states, or other power structures? And then cultural contact. So how does interaction with other societies through things like trade, conflict, colonization, or exchange, alter or hybridize cultural patterns. And then lastly, material to ideology. So how do changes in infrastructure, which when we're saying that, we're talking about the resources, the production, and the environment, ripple outward into new institutions, beliefs, or worldviews. Sorry about that, guys. That's a lot of content, I understand. If we move on, we can actually look at an example here. Right, so I've just kind of set this up to sort of illustrate what I'm talking about. So this is my fictional little society, the Stonefang clan. And so first we're going to look at what is the environment that they are existing within. So in terms of terrain, we've got the big towering peaks, we've got narrow valleys, steep passes, lots of snow, lots of wind, all of that sort of stuff. The climate has long, harsh winters, short, mild summers. In terms of resources that are available, obviously with mountains around, stone is quite plentiful, but wood is scarce. Rivers flood and wane seasonally, but they are also unpredictable. Excuse me. And then in terms of agriculture, we've got thin soils, limited arable land, and pastures are scarce. For flora, we have sparse alpine grasses, hardy shrubs, mosses, some wild berries, things like that, mostly on the slopes that get a nice amount of sunlight. And then fauna, obviously we've got herd animals, so goats, sheep, that sort of thing, animals that are able to adapt to this sort of climate, right? And there are also some predators up in the mountains and the high passes. And then lastly, in terms of sort of natural hazards, avalanches obviously are a risk, floods from snowmelt, sudden storms, isolation in winter. So that sort of sets the stage for the environment that my little Stonefang clan is going to develop within. So let's have a look at how they do develop. There we go. Okay, so in terms of the subsistence technology, right? So the clan herds goats and sheep. They grow small plots of hardy grains. They forage berries and roots. They use melt water to drink from. They store that in cisterns. And fuel comes from dung and scrub. And food is often preserved in stone cellars. So shelters are built also from stone or mud. Tools from bone and antlers, with rare metals gained through raiding other groups. In terms of how they organize, so they divide their roles seasonally, so they do their herding in summer, hunting and maintenance in winter, shared labor for hazard control. This slide is about to get quite busy, unfortunately. Settlement patterns, right? So small scattered stone hamlets in valleys, and these are linked by rope bridges and mountain paths. And then in terms of their religious political patterns, we've got clan elders. They arbitrate disputes. Seasonal religious rituals are tied to the snowmelt on the mountains, storms and predator migration as well. So now if we move to the symbolic systems for our little clan, in terms of symbols, avalanche markers also double as sacred boundary stones. Goat horns are carved with elaborate designs, and they're displayed as tokens of strength and survival. In terms of the rituals that they have, we're looking at seasonal offerings of milk and grain that are placed at flood walls and snowmelt channels to appease the mountain spirits. During storms, the community gathers to hold vigils. In terms of meaning making, so harsh winters and sudden storms are seen as signs of divine testing, and survival is seen as proof of worthiness before the gods. For their worldview, the Stonefang clan believe that the mountains are alive with unpredictable supernatural forces. So to endure the environment is to earn honour amongst these forces. The clan's sort of united effort to conquer nature is seen as their sacred duty. And now we'll move to the sacred landscapes example. So for our axis mundi, we've got a towering peak that is known as Stonefang itself. It lies far to the north. It is seen as the clan's origin and a central link between the mortals and the divine. Sacred versus profane, high passes, avalanche paths, and predator dens are taboo. Valley hamlets and terraces are sanctified through the clan's labour and domination of nature. For our mythic reenactment, we've got every spring, young warriors between 12, 14 years old, sort of that coming of age period. They take part in the sort of reverse reenactment of their ancestors' birth from the mountain Stonefang. So this is a coming of age ritual. It requires that they travel up the mountain, retrieve a sacred flower from the highest peak and bring it back. And then in terms of that word again, hierophany, so sudden storms, floods, rockfalls, these are all interpreted as direct manifestations of the mountain spirit's will. So let's summarize. The Stonefang clan endure in a world of jagged peaks, sudden storms, herding goats, scraping grain from thin terraces, and foraging what the mountains yield. Their stone huts cluster in valleys linked by rope bridges, while flood walls and avalanche markers guard against nature's fury. Survival itself is sacred. Goat horns are carved as tokens of strength. Offerings of milk and grain are left at flood channels, and storms are faced together as trials from mountain spirits. At the heart of the Stonefang clan's belief stands Stonefang itself, the towering peak that they call their origin. Each spring, the youths of their culture undertake a reverse birth, climbing, then descending from the mountain after claiming a rare flower at its peak, proving themselves ready to move into adulthood. So, there you kind of have like a basic, I guess, brief or narrative brief for this culture. And this would be great if your story and your game is about this culture at this point in time. You can kind of just work with it from here. But if you do want to advance it into the future, if you want to see how a culture like this might appear, 20, 30, 40, 100, 200, 500 years in the future, this is where we can bring in our speculative future stuff as well. So, for technological shifts, we can say that over the generations, herding and terrace farming develops into more sophisticated irrigation systems. Flood walls become permanent dams. Stonecraft evolves into advanced masonry and fortifications. Dung, scrub, fuel is slowly replaced by charcoal and small-scale water power. For our political complexity, we've got our clan elders, and they gradually consolidate into formal councils. Seasonal leadership becomes hereditary in some lineages, produce ranking hierarchies where powerful families claim closer descent from Stonefang itself, right? So you might have this group of people that are like, we are pure-blooded or whatever, right? We are directly connected to the original ancestors from the mountain. Obviously, that would cause all sorts of trouble. Cultural context, so trade with lowland societies has allowed new metals to be introduced into their culture. They're also getting textiles, they're getting new foods coming in. Outsiders to the culture might see the avalanche markers that the Stonefang clan have put up and consider them either obstacles or just kind of strange oddities about the culture, but the clan incorporates foreign goods into their rituals. So now instead of just offering milk or grains, they're also offering wine, they're offering coins, weapons as well, that they are pulling in from neighboring cultures. Conflict over mountain passes also would potentially introduce martial traditions from their neighbours. So they might pick up different fighting approaches, different warfare strategies from neighbouring cultures and sort of put their own spin on it. And then for material and ideology, so as waterworks and storage expand, the flood walls once blessed with offerings become temples. The mountain spirits once seen as unpredictable and punishing, they evolve into something more traditional like we would see with like the ancient Greeks, a traditional pantheon of gods. So they, in this instance, they might have river gods, storm gods, avalanche gods, all of these things that mirror their increasingly stratified society, right? They are expanding, and so their ideas are expanding as well. So there you have it. There's an example for you guys of how this can be used. But there is another application as well. So we can also use this pipeline to analyze or critique existing game cultures as well. This is helpful if we're wanting to assess where we can add more depth to a culture that we've already designed. It's also helpful for bringing in different types of storytelling, right? So like environmental storytelling can be made more meaningful if we have this sort of cultural resonance within it. And overall, it makes the experience for players a lot more engaging because they're able to like look at things and go, oh, I wonder what that means, or oh, I think it means this, and you know, you can have your discussions online and theorize and all of that good stuff. So let's have a look at the Gerudo culture from Legend of Zelda. So their cultural core is that they survive in a harsh desert environment. They survive through oasis farming, through trade, through raiding, and they have a matriarchal society organized around fortress strongholds. So the question here is their cultural core strong? I would say yes. The desert ecology is very strong and clear. It clearly informs how they live, how they survive, and how they have built their society. In terms of symbolic systems, they have a lot of symbols around crescent moons, desert flowers, and they also have their martial rites of passage to reinforce identity and resilience in the face of scarcity, of living in a desert, right? So in terms of whether this is strong or not, I think it's mostly strong. There's definitely a lot of striking visuals. There's definitely a lot of cool ideas around ritual for this culture. But the world building doesn't always fully connect back to their survival logic. So there's some room for improvement there, dare I say it. For their sacred landscapes, so we've got lots of ruins, we've got wells, we've got shifting sands, and this is all across their territory, but very few of them are specifically tied to ritual, to taboo, or to sacred geography. So this is where this culture could use a bit of love, I think. It's an underdeveloped part of the world building. This doesn't hurt the game, let me to be clear. I have not played all of the Legend of Zelda games, but the ones that I have played, I've thoroughly enjoyed, so there's nothing wrong with the game. But there is opportunity here to make stronger environmental storytelling in the world. So I'm going to conclude now and then open up for questions if anyone has any. Just the way that I wanted to conclude is kind of give you a few tips, I guess, maybe we'd call them. So this sort of living world pipeline, you should treat this as like a starting point, right? This is a way to lay narrative groundwork for believable cultures and societies. It's not meant to replace other world building approaches. It's meant to complement them instead. I am currently training to become a high school teacher, and so this word scaffold is showing up a lot in my work. So we want to think of this pipeline as a scaffold. It is a way to help build depth and detail where it serves the project. If it doesn't serve the project, skip it. You don't need it. If it does, but it's not quite fitting right, then adapt it, change it around a bit. This is not like a hard set of rules that you should follow. This is more suggestions or advice. Like I said before, we can use it to critique existing factions, cultures, societies that we have in our games, and it allows us to find where the strengths and weaknesses lie. Not everything that you draft will appear in the final game, right? I'm sure we all know this as writers, as storytellers, that sometimes you are like, this idea, I fucking love this idea, and then your boss comes along and goes, players are never going to see this. Why does it matter, right? And look, that is an understandable response, but I would also argue that these things aren't any less important, right? If any of you guys have a background in more traditional storytelling, you've probably heard of Ernest Hemingway's sort of iceberg theory, right? This idea that what the readers actually see is just a tiny bit at the top and there's all this massive stuff underneath. It's the same thing here, right? We may not see all of the world building in our games. We may only see a tiny percentage of it, but it's still important because the players can feel it, right? Players are smart, and players can tell when a world has been given the appropriate amount of detail and work and thought to it. So it's important regardless. And then on top of that, this sort of stuff can also be used to inspire the teams that you're working with, right? Oftentimes when I was working at Shark Mob, we would come up with a piece of writing, and it was writing that would never end up in the game, but it was writing that we would give to, say, our concept team or our level design team to use as inspiration to develop their own parts of the project. So important in that way as well. And then lastly, I just want to say, you guys don't need to become anthropologists or anything like that. This is not that intense. This is just about trying to create more believable, interesting, and immersive societies in our worlds. It's about creating environments that feel lived in, so that when the player enters it, they get this sense that this world exists even if I'm not logged in, right? Even if I've turned the game off, this world is still persisting without me. And I think that's a really cool, really important thing to explore when we're developing games. So yeah, that is me. I think I actually went faster than I thought I was going to, which is very surprising for me, especially with the amount of content I had in here. So I'm happy to take questions if anyone has any. If I don't know the answer, I will let you know that I don't know the answer and I will find it out for you, but I will try my best. There are a few questions, so people with a microphone, take your pick.
Hi. So I've got two questions, both related. One is, do you have any advice on how to organize and manage the background information that you're preparing for the rest of your team, such that they can make use as the project goes on? So, for example, wikis, that kind of stuff. And the second question is, how do you know when to stop the development of this? Because you could spin forever on this.
Go, we're really swinging right out of the gates there, aren't we? So your first question was sort of around how do you sort of organize this stuff in a way that is accessible to a team. There are a variety of different ways, and I've worked with a variety of different ways as well. Sometimes it's just a matter of having a single page that just gives you the very high-level highlights. So I don't know how to go backwards on this, but actually I guess it's probably the red button, So if we come back here, this is my fault for putting all these little animations on the transitions. So something like this would be a good sort of starting point, particularly if you're delivering this to, say, the concept art team and they are wanting to come up with a few ideas around what the Stonefang clan might look like. This gives just enough detail for them to have some direction, but not so much that we're kind of like stepping into their expertise and telling them what to do. So that's one way that I've done it. The other sort of main way would be like a world guide, and this is a much larger document. It is a non-linear document, so it's designed for anyone on the development team to jump in at any time they need to answer a question, and they should be able to just like look at the index or the table of contents and go, oh, okay, this looks like it connects with what I need to look at for my own work, and they can just jump there and have a read through and pick up the details that they want. So that are the sort of two main ways. Maybe the third way that I've done a fair bit of is just conversation. And like brainstorming around a table. Honestly, there's nothing better than sitting around a table with a bunch of creative people and tossing ideas around and poking holes in each other's work. So yeah, and your second question was how do we know when to stop? So I said before that if I didn't know the answer, I would let you know that I don't know the answer. I guess with this one, I kind of do know a little bit, but it's dependent on the project really. Like obviously with a big like 70+ hour RPG, you're going to want a lot more content than if it was like a little 7-hour indie game. So it really depends on I think both the like length and type of game you're working on. It depends on the narrative genre as well. A fantasy project is going to have a lot more world building than say a first-person shooter necessarily. And it also depends on the gameplay genre as well, right? So like what is the player doing, and that should lead us to understanding how much detail we need for it to make sense. Does that answer your question? Perfect.
I think we have time for one more question with the microphones. And
oh gosh, did I talk too long with one?
People can still stay and ask questions if they want. We just won't be able to actually hand out the microphone, so probably just have to go up and talk in person. Is that all good? That being said, any more questions?
Hey, so mine's also like kind of a two-parter. So the first part is that in anthropology, linguistics also plays a huge role. Where in your, I guess, path of development would linguistics kind of factor in? Would it be in the symbolic stage or the core stage or something like that? And then, in addition to that, how do you keep from getting too tropey when using this kind of technique?
Good questions. So just to clarify, so the first question was sort of like, at what point in the development process do you bring this sort of stuff into the mix, or for language specifically? So so to pull it back to the example that I had with the Stonefang clan, so like, how do they speak? What is their language? Yeah, I mean, that is a tricky question. Usually I would argue that you want to bring in world building stuff as early as possible, simply because it's useful for inspiring and really like getting an idea or a sense of what the game is going to be. In terms of language specifically, to be perfectly honest with you, if I ever have to like work with a fictional language, I tend to offload that job to a conlanger, someone who has a lot more experience in developing languages. But I would imagine you would want, at the very least during like sort of early world building stages, some sort of idea about the language, right? So like, maybe you would connect it to some real world languages that are similar in style and feel to what you're after. Yeah, really it would just be about sort of setting a few ideas around that. With the Stonefang clan, I think probably the language that they speak would be very much connected with the environment as well. So they might have a lot of focus on the mountains, things like that. Just quickly to give you another example, actually, I did work several years ago now on a failed small business idea with my partner, where we were developing little perfumes that had story connected to them, and part of that we hired a conlanger to create this sort of fictional language that we would use in the branding, and that language was all based around this idea of scent, right? So like they had words that we wouldn't have in English to describe scent in terms of like the aura of a person or the spirit or energy of a person, things like that. So that would be sort of the direction that I would take languages in if I was a conlanger. What was your second question again, sir? Oh, avoiding tropes. Yeah. I mean, well, actually, first off, I'll say there's a difference between a cliche and a trope, right? A cliche is definitely something you want to avoid. A trope is fine to use as long as you're putting your own sort of spin or twist on it. And so for me, I don't shy away from tropes. I think tropes are super helpful as signifiers of like what the genre is, particularly if you're working in like a really genre-focused story like horror or sci-fi or fantasy. You do want to use these kind of like flags to signal to the player, to the audience, that this is the sort of world or story that you are getting into. But yeah, it's just about taking that and thinking like, well, how can I spin that? Like, what is the unique thing that I can add to this trope so that it's not as easily recognizable as a trope? And that's different for every game, for every person, every writer. So all you can really do is try your best. Unfortunately, that's sort of the best advice I can give around that. So yeah.
I think that's all the time we have for questions and microphones. Everyone, please give a big applause for Nick. He did a great job.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.